2023 meeting at the City Council for the City of Mount Vernon to order. Please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're going to call the roll. Councilmember Beaton is excused this evening. Councilmember Brocksmith.
Here.
Councilmember Chris.
Here.
Councilmember Hudson.
Here.
Councilmember Molnar.
Here.
And Councilmember Morales.
Here.
And I am acting as Mayor Pro Tem this evening, and Councilmember Halston. I am here. All right. First order of business is review of public comments that were emailed to the city.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. I'm here, we have two comments this evening. The first is from Mr. Arthur Huff, and concern is the chicken ordinance. I'm Arthur Huff at 4014 Creek Place, Mount Vernon, Washington, 98273. I sent an email and I spoke at City Council meeting on June 13th, 2023 about the lack of a proper chicken ordinance in Mount Vernon, Washington. I'm aware that the Mayor and City Council has been working on a chicken ordinance, and I'm very much appreciative of that. I'm emailing today to again express my feelings about a reasonable number of chickens per household. Hopefully based not on just the number of chickens per household or the space in a coop or a yard, but consideration given to the overall chicken population that may accumulate in a community. I've always felt 6 chickens per house was more than enough, and I thought that the state of Washington sets a 6 chicken limit. I understand our city council can set Mount Vernon limits. I've asked dozens of Mount Vernon residents their thoughts on the chicken limits, and every person I spoke to except for one felt 6 chickens was enough, with more chickens being excessive. If an email can be sent to me with the information on how I can follow the progress of the proposed ordinance, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Arthur R. Huff. And then the second letter came from SICBA. It says, Mount Vernon City Council members, please find the attached input from the Skagit Island Counties Building Association.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
I believe that is public comment or public testimony for item A on the agenda.
Oh, it says it's for public comment.
Okay, I believe that was submitted as, I understood it to be submitted as.
Whatever it is, there's another letter in here
That
from
was from
SICBA
SICBA?
concerning that.
And we weren't able to bring up the other one?
I have it.
You have it, okay.
Okay, all right.
Morgan has one more.
So this is from Joseph Coomer from Oak Harbor. The subject is past resolutions urging all newspapers to publish articles supporting the concept of suspension as a solution to designing structures to be earthquake-proof, to change the Forest Service standard operating procedure from a ground operation to an air one using either the C5 or the C-17 in sufficient numbers that if they respond ASAP, they will have the capability of transporting enough water to extinguish all fires in a single pass. Integral with this change, I have Congress pass legislation that authorizes the money to fund the conversion cost of the C5s to tankers or manufacture a new C-17 tanker, and to assign the responsibility for crews and maintenance to the USAF. Attachments. An article titled Consider the Facts. An article titled Can We End Major Forest Fires? Article titled Is the FS Both Incompetent and Corrupt? Dear Mayor and Council members, the Mayor and Council members must realize that the main purpose of these 2 resolutions is to put pressure on newspaper publishers to publish articles supporting both concepts. In theory, publication will create public support, and public support has the ability to make changes. For a council member to vote in favor of a resolution may be easier to do than having one endorse the concept. Then the responsibility is shared by all, a significant difference. A resolution supporting The concept using suspension incorporated in new structure designs or modify existing structure to be earthquake-proof. It has much merit. One may recognize that the current concept of using the brute strength, although try as they do, it is impossible, and that concept should be abandoned. The concept of suspension is a radically new one that no known authority has ever investigated. In theory, when an item is suspended, it is not connected to the quake-moving earth. It is then not possible for a quake to force a suspended item to move. With no movement, then there is no dynamic loads generated and none to absorb. Properly suspended, the item is predicted to be earthquake-proof, able to survive unharmed by any quake, even the maximum of 1 of magnitudes 10. The justification is well documented in the 2 attached articles. A resolution supporting the proposed change in the Forest Service standard operating procedure from a ground operation to an air one using the C5 modified tanker or a production run of C-17s designed as tankers. Integral with this change is for Congress, in addition to funding one or both of these aircraft proposals, is to assign the responsibility for crews and maintenance of these giant birds to the USAF. Again, the justification is well documented in the attached article. The bottom line is with the AF crews maintaining the galaxies, in theory, they will achieve 2 goals. 1, there will be no more major forest fires because they will all be extinguished in their infancy. And 2, with the AF flying the missions in AF aircraft, there will be no justification for any contracted aircraft, so that practice will end along with the obvious corruption in this agency. Parallel with this effort is a total new organization possible called the Store Watchers, basically to watch government agencies and their finances. Currently, there's just this writer that is trying to watch many stores. The top of the list is to get his work published on the solution to earthquakes. Publishers may believe that they are well justified in refusing to publish this writer's solution to earthquakes, namely suspension. In reality, they are totally blind to the awful price, their lives, that so many thousands of people pay if they only knew what to do. Consider if your legacy included that you played a significant role in getting a solution to earthquakes, forest fires, and even floods proved and adopted. The first obvious step is to get his work published. Suppose that yours and other city or town councils were all members of this proposed organization. Combined, you might have the power to get published like many items of interest. Like in the city of Oak Harbor, this writer is trying to understand why the new sewer plant is over $100 million over budget. We understand and accept people that serve as council members are often just laymen and can make blunders too. The effort should be to expose the blunder and not overly punish those responsible. Try to understand and believe that your legacy could be much greater than just a council member. One should believe that being a member of the proposed organization would be well justified. Consider this thought. The current generation and future generations not yet born will inherit a world where earthquakes are no longer considered dangerous or even a concern, where there will be no more major forest fires because they will be extinguished in their infancy, where there will be no more floods because there will be plenty of dams and the reservoirs constructed that will have the ability to prevent flooding even from hurricanes. That is a real possibility. Sincerely, Joseph C. Coomer.
Thank you, Morgan. All right, for folks that would like to communicate with council and have your letters written or read into the record, you can contact or you can send your emails to communitycomments@mountvernon.gov. We're going to open it up for public comments. I remind folks that there are 3 public hearings tonight. If you want to address council for any reason other than one of those 3 public hearings, now is the time to do it. If you're here for one of the public hearings, you'll be called upon during that hearing. So is there anyone that would like to address council this evening? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to our consent agenda. Our consent agenda.
I just want to say thank you again for the checking ordinance. I wanted to show my face and let you
All right.
know I haven't forgot about it.
All right, thank you.
I do find it difficult to communicate. You know, all we get to do is speak in council. I haven't been able to get responses other than call the mayor's office.
We actually did pass the chicken ordinance,
Oh.
and we can forward that ordinance to you.
Well, I appreciate it.
Okay.
I do appreciate your help too. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the adoption of the consent agenda, this would be the approval of the September 13th, 2023 regular council meeting minutes. Approval of the September 23rd, 2023 payroll checks numbered 112209 through 112222. Direct deposit checks numbered 96157 and 96421, and wire transfers numbered 1255 through 1259 in the amount of $1,476,247.76. Also, the approval of the September 27th, 2023 claims numbered 23,000 through 23,195 in the amount of $3,439,871.07. What is the wishes of the council?
I'll move for approval of the consent agenda.
Okay, motion has been made by Councilmember Hudson to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Is second by Councilmember Correas. Any discussion? All those in favor of adopting the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by a sign of nay. Ayes have it. The consent agenda is adopted. All right, committee reports. We've got two reports on the agenda tonight. The Finance, Parks, and Enrichment Services. You'll also see Development Services on there. We actually canceled the Development Services meeting last week, so there will be no report from Development Services. But I will turn it over to Councilmember Hudson for her report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. We had this meeting tonight at 6 o'clock here in these chambers. The first item for business is always the approval of our meeting minutes, and that was approved and passed. Tonight it's usually a Finance and Parks meeting, but since our finance director is in Washington DC right now, we talked about parks. So that was a great, nice for them because they're usually cut off at some point. So the first thing we talked about was RCO deferred maintenance grant, and the parks applied for a deferred maintenance grant through the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office. No match is required, and the grant limit is $100,000. We asked for a grant of, I think, a little over $99,000, so we were close to the max. 215 grants were submitted. There was $5 million budgeted and $19 million being requested. So obviously it's a very competitive grant. We don't know how it's going at this point, but we'll news to follow on that one. Next, we discussed the 100-year celebration for Hillcrest Park. The park was established in March of 1924 and will be 100 years old in March of 2024. The staff is working with a citizen-based committee to plan a celebration for the community. Some of the ideas that they're talking about include a giant timeline reflecting all the changes that have occurred in the park over the last 100 years, gathering photos from over the years, capturing stories of what Hillcrest Park has meant to the community, and good stories about Hillcrest Park all over all the years. Talked about Hillcrest Park soccer field update. I'm sure most of you have seen. The water meter has been installed. The staff is lining out the irrigation, leveling the field, installing irrigation, adding topsoil, and then we'll be hydroseeding. The final step will be adding fencing and replanting the trees, which will either happen this fall or early next spring. A small parks update. It's unfortunate to say that graffiti, vandalism, and illegal dumping increased throughout the summer. Over 200 staff hours have been dedicated to just removing graffiti. Park safety is very important to all of us. New park hour signs have been posted in all the parks. Park rules signs are in the process of being installed at all the parks. And staff cleaned up the Milwaukee Street public parking lot for better visibility. Trees and trails, the parks crew is responsible for inspecting and pruning 343 street trees in addition to all the trees within the city parks and maintaining over 24 miles of trails. I'd like you to know that we do not have a huge Parks Department staff, so that's a lot of work that they're expected to do, and they do a fine job of keeping up with things. Tree work includes pruning, maintaining tree health, risk assessment, and emergency response. The Riverwalk beautification this past summer included updating the planter beds, sanding and refinishing the handrail along the Riverwalk, and hanging and watering the flower baskets along First Street and the Riverwalk. I think they said tonight that was over about 280 hours, 400 and some odd hours of time hanging and watering and taking care of the hanging baskets, which were quite lovely this year. I hope you all appreciated and enjoyed them. Facility maintenance work included installation of insulation in the crawl space at the Vokes House, playground repairs and troubleshooting HVAC, plumbing, and electrical issues. And Hillcrest Lodge is receiving some updates, including repair of structural poles, floors have been resurfaced, new hot water system installed. We're coming up with a new furnace and ducting, upgrade to lighting, installing new windows, and refurbishing the main door. So we're sprucing her up for the 100-year anniversary. We had a pros plan update. The last public survey is out to the community. I hope you've all received a postcard in the mail. Please respond. This is your opportunity to respond to the Parks Department to tell them what you think and what you want in your parks. So this is really important, and it's a valuable opportunity for you to take advantage of, so I hope you all consider doing that. We've had 548 responses have been collected up to today. It's going to be open for another 2 weeks. Some of the preliminary results show that we're getting really good participation over all the 3 wards of the city. Playground and play areas are important with 88% in support of developing, maintaining playgrounds and play areas. Development of an on and off-road non-motorized trails network is important with an 89% rating, moderate to high. So it's pretty good numbers on that. In general, residents rated the location of parks, quantity and quality of parks in the moderate category. We know there's work to do, but I think most people appreciate that we have a lot of really great parks, and we're just working to improve and upgrade what we've got. The final results will come to us next month or in November, one of the two. The last bit of information is the fall and winter recreation programming. The fall and winter brochure has been distributed and registrations are coming in for the classes. Staff is connecting with our homeschool population and designing classes that meet their needs and times. Volunteer appreciation event will take place in November, news to follow. A Veterans Day event will consist of a food drive for veterans and a service project helping a local veteran with yard work. And the Illuminate event, January 26, 2024, the recreation staff is taking a lead role in coordinating the event logistics and coordinating with the other partners in this project. And that, we ended our meeting at 6:38.
Thank you, Councilmember Hudson. Councilmember comments. Any council members have any comments this evening?
Couple
Councilmember
things
Bruckner?
I'd like to share with the public. So yesterday I was invited to participate in a small focus group on affordable housing in North Puget Sound with Governor Inslee and Representative Rammel, who pulled together the meeting. And just wanted to thank them for coming up here and hearing a little bit about our housing quandaries and some of our proposed solutions, because we're different from who they usually hear from in King County. So that was a good event, and I'm happy to talk with folks about what we talked about generally. Also was able to go to the Skagit County Community Court open house earlier today, and heard great reports about how effective they're being and how many folks are going through that process, and the low recidivism, where folks create offenses again. And so it's just a great program, and the judge had a lot of positive things to say about Mount Vernon and how well we're handling those kinds of referral programs. So thank you to our staff and to city prosecutor and stuff. It sounds like that's going really well. We definitely want to divert folks out of the court, the usual court system in jail whenever possible. So that's going really well. And last, I would end with an invitation to the people in the general public to attend the Fire Station 3 open house at September 30th from 10 to 2. We've just spent several $1 million to upgrade that fire station, and we haven't seen it yet, I don't think. So I think you'll see some of us there, and I hope the general public would join us with that. So thank you for the time.
Right. Thank you, Councilmember Brocksmith. Any other comments? Didn't inspire anybody to have any additional comments? Okay. All right. Committee agenda requests. Are there any committee agenda requests? All right. Hearing none, we have no unfinished business, so we will move into new business. Our first order of business is a public hearing in regards to the Design Review Committee. I would invite our Community and Economic Development Director to come forward and give a presentation to council. The council will have an opportunity to ask any questions. Then we'll open up a public hearing and then close the hearing and go from there. So.
All right. Well, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and I appreciate staff and members of the public being here this evening. Always my pleasure to speak to council, and it's exciting. This is my first time speaking to council, so thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it. So as the Mayor Pro Tem said, this is the open record hearing to accept public testimony and then also at the council's pleasure to deliberate on the recommendations from the Planning Commission concerning code changes that would ultimately result in the dissolution of the city's Design Review Board. Provided in advance of this evening's meeting was a draft ordinance for your review, a brief department memo, and then additionally the proposed red lines with that ordinance to the municipal code that would affect the changes and ultimately the existence of the board. So the department this evening would respectfully recommend that the City Council hold the hearing tonight, accept testimony on the Planning Commission's recommendation, and their recommendation is to not adopt the proposed amendments as they are presented this evening in the draft ordinance. And subsequently, as I mentioned, if it's the council's pleasure, to consider either approving the draft ordinance, denying it per the Planning Commission's recommendation, modifying, or to refer back to the Planning Commission the proposal for further study or work. At the end of this presentation, I'll spend a little time detailing out each of those options that council has this evening. So this evening, very briefly, we've already gone over the recommendation, but I want to include a brief discussion of the regulatory context within which code amendments take place. We'll also review the background and timeline of this particular suite of amendments that's under the deliberation this evening. I'm going to summarize the scope of the amendment. So in other words, we'll bring up a slide that summarizes those pages of red lines that you were given for review. And then ultimately, as I mentioned, conclude with the options that are available to council this evening for consideration, if it's your pleasure to go into deliberations this evening on the future of the amendments. So here, this graphic illustrates in pyramid form the three broad categories of land use decisions and permits. As council knows, this evening's code amendments fall into the legislative category, and that forms the base of that graphic, that permit. So as you know, those are processes where a recommendation is made by Planning Commission. They are your advisory body for land use legislation. And then their recommendation or changes are ultimately adopted or not adopted by the elected officials, i.e. the City Council. Now, we're at the stage where the fundamental planning decisions are being made. Think this is where we decide how tall a building can be, how large or small setbacks are going to be, or in the case this evening, the process and the body that are going to be responsible for design review. So on the next agenda item this evening, after this one, there will be a quasi-judicial presentation and open record hearing, if I remember correctly. Thank you. Closed record hearing, thank you for the correction, and Ms. Mainville-Ills is going to present that. So that'll put us in that middle part of the pyramid, where in this case the council is going to act as a judge and weigh material evidence to make a land use decision. The last item that Development Services will be bringing this evening is going to take us back into legislative territory. Ms. Mainville-Ills is going to present legislation that would amend our non-conforming chapter in municipal code. All right. Oh, and I did forget to mention, as we all know, and probably the most visible part of what Development Services does and what the City Council sees is the administrative review of permits. Sometimes these are called ministerial as well. And this is where council has granted planning staff the authority to make final decisions on permits. So think things like building permits, site plan reviews, boundary line adjustments. All right, so now that we've gone over that broader regulatory background, let's shift specifically into the project background for these particular code amendments. So approximately 18 years ago, if you can believe that, 2005 was over 18 years ago, the city adopted its first iteration of design standards and then also established the Design Review Board, which, as you know, is the 5-member citizen board that interprets, reviews, and implements the design review standards that are currently adopted in code. Now, approximately 4 years ago, that 2018-19 era, the city adopted updates to those design standards, and that's the current code that we're operating under today, the ordinances that were adopted in 2019. Now then, fast forward to this year, and the council will recall that in April of this year, it approved the legislative work program for development services. This is known as the 2023 docket. And that docket included direction from council to the Department and Planning Commission to work on updates to code that would eliminate the Design Review Board. Now, the department then, in fulfillment of this guidance in July, in subsequent months, completed our non-project environmental review of the proposed edits, and that's SEPA, that environmental review. We submitted notice to both the public and to the State Department of Commerce as required by local and state regulation, and also worked on the code changes. And then on August 15th of this year, the Planning Commission held a duly noticed public hearing. The vote was 5-0-2-0, to recommend denial, 2 were absent that evening, to not adopt those code changes, and i.e. to not eliminate the Design Review Board. Now, to date, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for giving me access to that letter, there has been one piece of written testimony submitted, and I'm kind of looking to confirm to see if council's in receipt of any other written testimony from the public. Thank you so much for confirming for me. One piece of written testimony submitted by the public that is in support of the proposed changes. So that brings us to this evening. And council is holding its duly noticed open record hearing to accept testimony on the Planning Commission recommendation and take action if it wishes. So this slide summarizes the red lines for council's consideration. Changes are proposed in the administrative code, which is chapter 2 of the MVMC. Changes are also proposed in the land use code, chapter 14, and then also in the zoning code in chapter 17. And you can see from this that the balance of these changes is going to result in the repeal and the dissolution of the Design Review Board, eliminate references. It's also, more importantly, if the Design Review Board is going to be eliminated, it makes clear when design review is either in the realm of administrative approval, i.e. staff, remember that top of the pyramid, or whether approval, if we are also doing a quasi-judicial permit, and that design review is part of a quasi-judicial process, then the hearing examiner would be the approving authority for design review in that case. So to conclude, the Development Services Department affirms that the review of the draft code amendments has met all the legal, procedural, and factual requirements, including compliance with state and local regulations for public noticing, non-project environment review, and including the transmittal of a motion from the Planning Commission to the City Council for their consideration. If it's council's pleasure to deliberate and take action this evening, the following options are available. You may adopt the red lines and draft ordinance as presented this evening. You may adopt an ordinance with modifications, though, as Mr. Rogerson was good to remind me today, and I will remind the council as well, substantive changes to the code would require there to be a renoticing additional public hearing so that the public has full opportunity to review the changes that the council would like to consider. Your 2 other options are to not adopt the ordinance, and this is the recommendation from the Planning Commission. Or you can also have the option of remanding the code work back to the Planning Commission, back to staff, and provide a scope of the further research and work that you would like to be completed. That's the end of my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions from the council prior to the submission of public testimony.
Are there any questions at this point in time?
I have one. Is the vote, is that public record on who voted to, who was not present? Is that
can we do that in an open meeting or not?
Yes, that is public record. That is noted in the minutes for the meeting, and I can go ahead and reference that right now for you.
That'd be great.
Thank you. I'll be just a moment while I get to that page. All right. The commissioners that were absent that evening when the vote was made were Commissioners Johnson and Hart. The commissioners present that evening were Mr. Chair Orr, Vice Chair Fikert, I apologize if I mispronounce that last name, Member Carlson, Commissioner Vanderstoop, and Commissioners Curry.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, at this time, I'm going to open the public hearing. We will take the written testimony that was submitted first. We'll have that read into the record, and then we're going to open up for the rest of the those that wish to speak. I would remind people that when you approach the podium, please state your name and your city of residence. And at this time, Mr. Phillips will come up and read the letter he wanted to read earlier.
So, Mayor Pro Tem, do you want me to just read the email, or would you like me to read the entire letter?
I haven't read it, so.
There we go.
Is it substantive?
So there is a letter
It's
from SICPA. I
substantive.
will read the entire letter here. It's from the Skagit Island Counties Builders Association to the Mount Vernon City Council. The subject is repealing Mount Vernon Municipal Code 2.61 Design Review Board and amending the Mount Vernon Municipal Code 1405 procedures and 1770 design review to implement revised design review process. Mount Vernon City Council members, the Skagit Island Counties Builders Association would like to go on record in full support of repealing Mount Vernon Municipal Code 2.61 and amending Mount Vernon Municipal Code 1405 and 1770, allowing implementation of the revised design review process. The design review process, as it is now exists, was created by the City of Mount Vernon a number of years ago as an additional process for builders and developers to go through in order to start a project in the city, some of which have been affordable housing. Affordable housing is something every jurisdiction is lacking, especially in the low-income and entry-level housing. The Design Review Board has proven over the years to be another huge hurdle for a designer, architect, builder, and developer to have to clear in order to do a project in Mount Vernon, even though they have complied with all the provisions of the design and code in place at that time. Personal preference is not something that should be considered when looking at a project, but in some cases, it has appeared to be what was considered even though the project fully complied with the rules in place. Just the process of interaction between this body and staff in the various departments has proven to be very time-consuming. In many cases, the project has been scuttled because of the time this entity has required to make a decision that they all could agree with. This is not healthy for the needed growth and development of a city to meet the housing needs of the community. Guidelines are in place that govern what is expected and required in order to construct buildings and homes in Mount Vernon. The city has professional staff who are fully capable of following the guidelines and making decisions that affect a project in a much quicker time frame. In most cases, these decisions can be made as a permit is moving through the system instead of having it removed from the system for the Design Review Board to look at. Then after this delay, it would have to be put back into the system to travel through the rest of the process. Decisions could include the city attorney in some cases, but in most, the decision should be straightforward in determining compliance with the guidelines in place with the Mount Vernon City Code. The way we see this proposal is that it is a step in the right direction to let professional staff conduct the work they have been trained for and to help move the permitting process along in the city in accordance with the current guidelines and code. Anytime there is a delay in the permit process, there is an added cost that goes along with the project. In many instances, those cannot be averted, but in this case, this action will remove one of those built-in delays that add to the cost of the project and delay of the permitting being issued, allowing the project to move forward. Builders and developers cannot afford to absorb costs associated with delays in permitting of projects, especially multifamily projects, and will roll the additional costs into the final project, resulting in less affordable housing for those citizens. I would like to reiterate SICPA's support for discontinuing the Design Review Board concept and allow staff to do their professional work in accordance with the current guidelines and code for which they have been trained. Thank you, Charles W. Kreider, Executive Officer, SICPA.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. I believe that is all the written testimony that we have, so we will open it up for in-person testimony. So is there anyone that would like to speak either in favor or in opposition of the ordinance as presented?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'm Ellen Gamson. I live in unincorporated Skagit County, Big Lake. I'm one of those users that have always considered downtown Mount Vernon my community. And I am employed by the Mount Vernon Downtown Association as the executive director and have been so for 10 years. To be honest, I'm a little trepidatious to be standing before you again on this particular matter. For 14 years, the city and the Mount Vernon Downtown Association have worked in concert to revitalize our downtown. And while downtown will always be a work in progress with room for improvement, together we have achieved much. I venture to state that we could not have arrived here without each other, and the Downtown Association certainly could not do what we do without your support. I would never want to jeopardize our valued partnership and collaboration, but I do believe that there is room in our relationship for respectful disagreement. Therefore, I'm here this evening to respectfully disagree and to state on the record one last time that I believe your intended action to approve code revisions that result in eliminating the Design Review Board is ill-advised. I'm going to add an unplanned comment here that the SICPA record references, or letter references housing development, of which the Design Review Board has reviewed one project to add apartments to a building, approved that permit, and hasn't moved forward because of the I guess the developer has chosen to go another direction. But primarily of all the projects the Design Review Board has reviewed, none of them have, other than that particular one, involved housing. So back on my planned script here. While I agree that the process is codified by city staff when the Design Review Board was created in 2019, not 2005, I might correct the record, were needlessly bureaucratic and inefficient. I believe that the best response would be to revise and streamline the processes created and offer review at an earlier stage of the permitting process, not eliminate the independent volunteer review board. Growth and change are inevitable, and when managed well, can enhance a community and bring increased prosperity for all. When managed poorly or not at all, it can decimate the unique personality and character that made it attractive in the first place. There will always be a tension between new and infill development interests and historic preservation interests. The design standards were arrived at following nearly a decade of advocacy to provide a mechanism for balancing those sometimes conflicting priorities. And I am relieved that, at least for now, the standards will remain in place. However, removing the role of interpreting and enforcing them from a team of dedicated, expert, and passionate volunteers who serve out of care for the community, and remanding all authority to one or two staff people and/or a paid consultant, all of whom are potentially subject to political and/or financial pressure, is not the best course for the best outcomes for our community. Design review is most important when a project is presented that is not fully compliant, and an individual's values and subjective judgment is necessarily brought to bear on whether the community is best served by requiring full compliance, allowing a variance or an exception, or finding some middle ground compromise where everybody wins to some degree. I'm happy to say that in all of the projects that we have reviewed and that have moved forward or are moving forward, we have only been asked to consult on those projects that were not in compliance, and we have arrived at great results. This council in earlier meetings has highlighted the 7-Eleven at the gateway to our community as an example of exactly the kind of result that your Design Review Board achieved for you in 4 hearings. A delicate balance is best achieved by having more expertise and more perspectives, independent and unencumbered by financial interests brought to bear, not fewer. I believe it should give council pause that both the Planning Commission, appointed by council to advise in these matters, and the two design consultants who potentially stand to gain financially from your intended action tonight have spoken out in opposition to it. Let's fix the process, not eliminate the protection. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak either in favor or in opposition to the proposed ordinance?
Hello, council members. My name is Christian Carlson. I'm a resident of Mount Vernon, downtown property owner, downtown business owner, planning commissioner, and member of the review board under consideration. And I wanted to speak to you because I have a sense that there's been a little bit of misunderstanding on a few points that perhaps bear some clarification. For one thing, as I think you know, the jurisdiction of the Design Review Board is very small. It's just downtown. So for instance, the project that was read into record earlier, the apartment the condominium or apartment building, was never reviewed by the Design Review Board. So that's a different case than this. And if you read the meeting minutes from our meetings, what you would see is a trend where in almost every case, there's something that was impractical for the applicant to comply with. So as an example, the design review part of the code stipulates that the proportions of an opening should be of such and such a proportion to match the proportions of the downtown buildings. If an applicant came to us with an existing building that had a very different proportion of openings, we've said, well, of course we're not going to ask you to change the masonry opening of your building. That would be ridiculous. So we, in most cases, say, for common sense reasons, it would be impractical for them to comply. Just in the last meeting that we held last week, the applicant has a building on 3rd Street with 2 streets of frontage, 90 and 95 feet. The requirements were for them to have continuous or almost continuous weather protection. We deemed that because of the kind of size and magnitude of the project, that it would be utterly impractical and onerous and too onerous for this owner to be expected to put up almost 200 feet of canopy. So we asked that they place canopies only over the entrances as what we thought was a reasonable way of addressing this. So the point being, we've really actually never done anything that was obstructionist. If anything, we've cleared the path for an easier, quicker process. And so I would ask that you consider a different approach, because my concern is what's being presented, what you've decided to potentially agree to is having the department head do this as an administrative decision with her consultant, which honestly might be me. And so, as was suggested by Ellen, I personally would stand to probably benefit financially from this arrangement that you're about to vote on. I'm still hoping that you don't, because my fear is we don't have a right-on development director at some point in the future. We have somebody who's more inclined to bend over backwards to a developer saying, oh, look, all that stuff that we're being asked to do, way too restrictive, way too onerous. You'll never get anybody to agree to those things. We have to back way off on our expectations of this project. And if that director agreed to that and had a consultant who was like-minded, in 2 very quick steps, we've lost all of our ability to, for instance, on a huge project on our waterfront, have the kinds of checks and balances that we wish to have. There's a level of development that you see if you go to a community like Fairhaven, south of Bellingham, where almost everything is being built with brick, cast stone, deep set windows, beautifully proportioned. All of those buildings would pass our design standards. You could also go to Linwood and see several hundred unit apartment buildings being built in the last few years that would also pass. The facades are crenellated, there's roof pitches, There's things that make them kind of different colors and different levels of interest. The difference in quality is night and day. So if we wish to have fine development, community-oriented development on, as an example, our waterfront, which we're hoping to develop in the next few years, I really hope that we have a considered board that keeps us protected from what could be a shortcut into some bad development decisions. And so that's, I'm just being honest, that's my fear. I have a vested interest in this. My business and home and property are just around the corner from that waterfront development. And so I'm really wishing that a comprehensive process be considered that would protect the citizenry against shoddy development. Thank you very much.
Anyone else wishing to speak?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. My name is Belisa Cucci. I'd like to share a story of a personal situation that took place in downtown, but I'd like to give a little bit of background about myself. Personally, my family has owned buildings in downtown Mount Vernon for the past 40 years. Professionally, I've been in commercial real estate and finance throughout the western United States. So I've seen a lot of work with committees. I've been involved in a lot of decision-making that's taken place with the properties downtown. I've had difficult times at times working with the city, and I've had wonderful times. I've had difficult times working with the design committee, and that's why I'm here today. So one thing I'd like to share with you is that in 2016, when the Downtown Design Committee first came into play, formally, there's actually conversation took place back in 2006, when the purpose at that time was to provide recommendations for different materials, different uses of the property, color schemes, things like that. But it was all in a recommendation purpose. And then 16, the formalization of the Downtown Committee formalized, and my husband Jim Cucci and I were some of the first members on it. And we sat on the committee for a period of time, but then we became uncomfortable over a period of time because the direction was leading to too much decision-making at a committee level versus in the hands of the city, of the codes and the ordinances that the city was starting to develop. So that's kind of my background at this point, and as a result of that, over time, we did step down from the committee. I want to set forth that please note that the elected officials making these decisions and that the standards that are approved in place can control what's taking place in the downtown community. If we're talking about residential properties, we have homeowners associations. This is commercial property, I understand. But let me share a story. One of the buildings in downtown Mount Vernon that we own back in 2018 and continues on, but today we've got the problem rectified, is a law firm. We were contacted in 2018 because the building is brick facade on the outside with an alcove on First Street. As a result of this little alcove and the transient population, this tenant was having to deal with a population that was doing drugs, sleeping there, defecating there, setting fires in there, whether it was to keep them warm or whether it was to do drugs, we don't know. And it got to the point having sex in there, and the employees would have to step over this in the morning. COVID hit, things slowed down, we understand. As property owners, we took it upon ourselves at that time to coordinate with an ironsmith, and we had a gate constructed for the area. We went ahead and had the gate built, and then it went in front of, for permitting purposes, and we received deficiency notices, no complaint. We had to change out some magnets, we had to change out some signage to keep it open during the hours. We had to work with the swing situation on it. But that was all controlled by the enforcements of the city. We worked through the process. We still could not get permission to get the gate installed. Then we received notification that the design committee had made the decision that they did not want an iron gate. It did not reflect welcoming into the downtown community. Now, during the time I was on the design committee, we actually took trips to look at other communities. We visited the Ballard community, looking at a combination of how we could put multifamily and commercial properties together. Communities that had iron gates,
The downtown already has iron gates in our buildings. There's nothing offensive about it. We can go to historical communities around the country, and this is what we see. The message that came back to us, we want a glass gate instead. Really, we're trying to keep people out, and a glass gate is the answer. So the gate went into storage, and it sat there for many, many months. And we couldn't resolve the problem. We had a tenant with the growing problem of downtown Mount Vernon that had to continue battling this on their own, tried to take up the conversation with the city themselves to get help. I took up the conversation again with the city, and we started to make some progress, and then I received a notice from the city that because of the new request of the glass gate, I had 3 options. One was to resubmit a permit for a glass gate. The second one was to ask the city to withdraw the permit. The third one was ask the city to deny the permit and provide me my appeal rights. So we continued to wait. And then one day, I'm going to share with you, my husband and I were out of the country, and we received an email. The email said, from an unknown source with the city of Mount Vernon, come pay your permit and install your gate. And to this day, we don't know who that was. But we received an email from our tenant, we love this gate. So that was a personal experience. My request, please, and I would like to get this correctly, so I'm going to read it to you. Please remember, the Downtown Design Standards Committee is a non-elected body of individuals, and many are great individuals. But the city of Mount Vernon has the necessary codes to govern the design and materials of our buildings. We do not need a downtown design committee making these decisions. Please dissolve this board. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Pardon? Okay. Anyone wishing to speak to the ordinance that's before us? If not, I will close the public hearing. Council, any questions of our director or any comments on the proposed ordinance?
Should I start?
Why not?
Why not? It's hard to even know where to start, but thank you for all the comments. And I know we all have, the interest of downtown Mount Vernon in our heart and best interests. So I appreciate the civil discussion. Let's see. Sorry, I'm struggling a little bit with this because it's complex. But I suppose my comments are that when we talked about this multiple months ago, we had lots of conversation around this and really looked at quite a few options. And I don't think everybody got exactly what they wanted, but I think we agreed that we wanted to continue to simplify our permitting process in the city while continuing to implement the design standards and have high quality development. And we had had a lot of discussion with the Downtown Association about what could we do that would be short of a formal design review board, but still provide that multiplicity of review and opinions, and could the Downtown Association help us provide that through the administrative design review process, which requires a pre-application meeting and a public meeting downtown for the design review for downtown permits. And I think we agreed that a compromise approach would be to dissolve the design review board and to support the Downtown Association and provide them, I don't know if authority is the right word, but a partnership with the Downtown Association where they could help us with the design navigation team that would participate in the application process. And so when I read the material in our folder, all I see in our materials are the dissolution part and not anything that develops and formalizes and recognizes that we want to have the Downtown Association helping us with this process and supporting project applicants to give them ideas of how we can, meet those design standards. So I'm frustrated that it came to us this way without any of that context, and maybe it is that we've had a changeover in our leadership in the department. I don't know, but I am still at a loss as to what's in front of us is not what we talked about 6 months ago. It doesn't include that other half of the agreement. So I don't know if anybody here can speak to that other part of the agreement, but I'm not prepared to vote in support of this without seeing what we talked about in writing, and this does not represent what we talked about.
The director's still here, maybe she can address that. You were hiding behind the computer screen.
Right,
right?
exactly.
Welcome to Mount Vernon.
Yes, thank you again, Councilmember Brocksmith, Council and Mayor Pro Tem. So to the extent of my knowledge and understanding, these were the red lines that were brought to the Planning Commission for deliberation and recommendation. Up to this point, I was not made aware of additional guidance either through the docket or through my conversations about the additions to code that you were mentioning, Councilmember Brocksmith. But certainly, to tie back your comments to the option that the City Council has this evening, if it's your pleasure to take action, this body can certainly remand these edits back to the Planning Commission for additional work, and as you were describing, Councilmember Brocksmith, can, as a body, define the scope of what those amendments should include. And if a majority of council agrees, then to direct us to include a scope to include, like you had mentioned, those past conversations and some different avenues.
And I'm not even 100% sure that partnership with the Downtown Association needs to be in code per se, right? And so, but I just don't know. I don't know, and there's nothing in the briefing materials that talks to that. And maybe it's an off-code, agreement or something else, but I just don't see it in our briefing materials, and so all I see is one half of the solution.
All right, any other council member comments or questions?
Oh, go ahead. I struggle with this. I've struggled with this since the beginning of it. I can hear both sides and see both sides of the equation, and I know that the Downtown Design Committee is passionate about keeping the design standards. I understand that. But, to what Belisa was saying, I mean, that must have been the most frustrating thing, and I don't know all the details of that, what the whole backstory was, so I can't. And I'm sorry that some of the other development community didn't speak tonight too, because I'm sure they have other things to add. So there's more dialogue to have. I don't know that I'm ready to vote to disband it. The committee, I think it needs to be tweaked. I don't know what that looks like, but I think the council needs to have kind of I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but the final say. I mean, we're the elected officials. We're the ones that should be making the decisions with guidance, right? That we should have guidance and input from people so that we're not willy-nilly making decisions. I just am not comfortable at this point moving forward, and I really think Councilmember Beaton needs to be able to weigh in on this as well, because she was one of the first people that really brought up the conversation. Mm-hmm. So at this point, I'm not ready to move forward on a vote. I think there's more discussion to be had, and yeah, I guess I don't know what else to say, but that's kind of how I feel at this minute.
Okay. Gary?
Yeah, I some of it is a little bit foggy, when you start throwing months ago into this thing. but from my memory of it, it was, we want to be more efficient, and we do not need a bunch of delays. And there was just, Darren talked about the different layers, everything got layered, and that kind of really stuck to me. And I agree in his assessment of that you can make things a lot simpler, but yet have input. It almost feels like, I mean, Mary, you're not you really, but it just, I guess in the different comments that these design standards are going away. They are not going away. They are solidified.
Yep.
I don't know if, and I don't know if I'm supposed to talk with Christian about this at another time, but there was comments kind of coming from that, our directors would just be able to unilaterally and not allow, not enforce our code. Well, that to me, no. Well, I don't know.
Public hearings
And
actually
this
been
is why
closed.
we probably, I would agree with Mary, there's just a little bit more to this whole thing where that probably does need to get ironed out. But I for one, whether it's putting the delusion to the downtown design review board, but having them still be a part of things. And Christian, you were talking about it because you might be a consultant anyway in some of that. So for me, I'm looking for how can we be most efficient in our department? And I think it's going to be crucial that our department lets us know what they think about the disillusion. I mean, and give us some insight. I think we touched on it a little bit, but, and even with you talking, Richard, I mean, you're right, it's a red line here, but we probably were trying to get some of the insight coming from the people that used to be on this board. So, if you want to table it,
Any other council member comments?
Yeah,
Let me address somebody that hasn't spoken yet, and then we can come back to somebody that has.
thank you. I'll just add on to the conversation because every council member has spoken, just to add on to it. What's before us today, I mean, should not reflect a reputation or image on the individuals who are serving on the design review board. And so it's not about the individuals, it's more about the systems and structures that we have in place currently, and also what we're looking at. It comes down to the idea of that I think it's worth exploring just a little bit more. And the reason for that is because I did read the agenda item in its entirety. I saw the strike-throughs that were added in the document, and I saw how the Planning Commission voted, 5-0-2-0. But any logical situation would say, if I'm recommending you not to do this, I would also know what the recommendation would be as the alternative. And so I understand, as presented, it was recommended to not go forward, but I also need to know, well, what are the alternatives? You said not to do this, but what are you saying to do as the other options? And having no answer to that question, I am of the opinion that it would make sense to explore this a little bit further, perhaps at a committee in later weeks, but also to not prolong this any further. This has been a conversation that's been almost the entirety or a good part of the year, so we do need to figure this out, but there's still some questions that we need some answers to so that this legislative body can make the right decision.
I'm just gonna chime in real quick. So I do wanna make it clear that we would not be eliminating the design standards for downtown. Those are set, those aren't what we're talking about. We're talking about the process. And if my memory serves me correctly, when we were having the conversations with Director Growth, was the instruction was to bring the design review committee in like a pre-app or in a even sooner than that, so that there'd be more of a kind of a public display of what the proposed project was, give the design review committee an opportunity to weigh in on that, make recommendations at that time, have a written suggestion to the director, and then at that point in time, the director could either adopt some of those recommendations, but it would all be done administratively. I think that's what we had originally talked about. That was kind of where we were heading, and it does seem that we're a little off track from that.
So, thank you. Just wanted to clarify for the people who are watching, if they are interested, that we do not have a design review board for anything outside the downtown area, if I'm not mistaken. So there's been several statements that, you know, may have confused that. So this is solely about the design review board, which we had a few years ago empowered to help us make sure that downtown grew in a way that we'd all be proud of. Right, and just to Gary's point, channel Christian for a second, I think it's not whether it's, you know, there's discretion in that code, and there has to be some interpretation, and you want that because, as Christian said in his testimony, they're trying to find ways to make it simple and easier, and having that recommendation go to the director so the director can use that makes a lot of sense for me. So I think there's value to our city to have that. I think that's maybe the answer. It's not always a black and white. There's interpretation in there, especially when you're redeveloping historic buildings, right? So you have to have a little common sense on top of the code. That's what they're applying. I think those are the two things that I wanted to share.
I think it kind of spurred my memory a little bit too when we were talking about it. I think what was happening is city says this is, you apply for your permit, you do, you know, this is what you gotta do. And then what was happening is the downtown design review was like, oh, well, wait, you can't do that, or this is, we want, so there was this added layer that was going on past it. And I think we were coming out of the meeting months ago that if that was tied in right out of the beginning, so at least the city was on the same page as the design review board, and everybody was on the same page, the applicant wouldn't be going, well, we're dealing with this, and now this is changing, and now, you know, and like Melissa said, I mean, she's getting a permit all of a sudden, and then who is it? Who said what? I think we could clear that up and make it a lot cleaner. I think, again, we could come to a solution here.
Stacy? I know you're back there. I can see you between the screen. You had referenced some legislation that is kind of limiting the scope of a design review committee. Would you mind sharing that with council and with the public?
Yes, sir, thank you, certainly. So there, right now is a House bill that has been worked on, and what it is it's focused on ensuring that design review processes within cities are predictable and move more swiftly. And so within that proposed House bill, there's a suite of options in order to do that. So yes, there is, as we know, this past year been historic legislation related to the Growth Management Act, and a lot of it very hyper-focused on permit review timelines, processes, what we can do, hopefully not unfunded mandates from the state, and hopefully something they'll give us some money and support to do. But certainly, yes, there is focus in this particular House bill about design review and how it can be made more efficient.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So, it appears that the body is kind of indecisive on how to move along with this. I would entertain a motion to refer this back to committee. Maybe we can have a committee, Development Services Committee meeting around this subject and work out some of those details. And then if it requires going back to Planning Commission or whatever, maybe this body can chime in during that committee meeting and then give clear direction. Would that be the will of this body?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion was made by Councilmember Brocksmith, seconded by Councilmember Molinar, to refer this back to the Development Services Committee. Any further discussion?
I got one question. Not to put you on the spot, Kevin, but, Stacy was kind of talking about you might be involved in how that process would take place. I mean, are we setting a precedence to?
Decision of the council, this isn't quasi-judicial, you need to follow your GMA public participation program. Now, in committee, you can't take action, as we all know. So your actions still will be before you, which is either to approve the proposed ordinance, adopt the recommendation of Planning Commission, remand it back to the Planning Commission, or you can actually make substantial changes on your own, move, through a regular council meeting, and then any of those substantial changes, you have to give another 15 days notice and another opportunity for the public to weigh in on your legislative proposals. So while you deliberate in committee, which is not expressly allowed in the public participation program, any action you would still have to take would be done at a noted regular public hearing. And frankly, with the changes in the Open Public Meetings Act, if you're going to take any final action anyway, you're going to have to allow public comment, generally speaking. So,
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, the motion on the floor right now is to send this proposed ordinance back to the Development Services Committee and to see what can be ironed out at that point in time and decide where it needs to go, whether it needs to come back to the council or whether it needs to be sent back to Planning Commission. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed by a sign of nay. Ayes have it. That has been submitted back to, or amended back to the Planning Commission. All right. Our next order of business is a closed public record hearing, and Mary Ann is going to present that to us.
It's slow tonight, sorry guys. Good evening, council and Mayor Pro Tem. This, the first thing that I'm going to present to you tonight is the closed record public hearing for special permission and associated variances. And as you know, we've, over the course of the year, I've been here several times with a number of these special permission requests. This one's a little bit different tonight than the ones that have been before you before. This one is much more complicated than some of the other ones that we've had. And it's fitting because it's the last one you're going to see. So this is the Plan 230214 and 215, and it's for the Thurn Wing, and it's special permission and associated variances. And the property is located at 314 East Section Street. It's parcel number 54841, and you can see where it is located on the screen up here. So this is a request to replace a single-family home that was substantially damaged by a fire. And so the now damaged home is located in a multifamily zone, the R3 zone. And in that zone, we don't allow single-family houses. And additionally, the lot itself is only 3,017 square feet. It's 25 feet wide and deep. So it's a lot that was created in one of the really old plats in the late 1800s, and very narrow lots. The whole block is similarly situated, where they're smaller houses on these tiny little lots right up against the edges of the lots, barely room between them. So, and in this case, when this after the fire had happened and they started to work on replacing it, they discovered that the original house actually wasn't even completely on the lot. So there were a lot of challenges facing this applicant when they came to replace the house. So, like I said, the house was built prior to the adoption of the zoning code at all. It was built in the early 1900s, and so it doesn't comply with the standards that are in place today. And as you know, in order to alter a non-conforming use, we go through this special permission process. And that we've done that a bunch of times. You guys have seen that. In this case, in order for the house to be able to be located on the lot, because it is small and narrow, we also need a number of variances to allow them to be able to replace the house. We need variances that would reduce the setbacks on the side. I mean, they're going through a boundary line adjustment to get an additional 2 feet. And with that, they'll be able to end up with 3 feet on each side, but that is not the 15 feet that are combined that is required. There's no way you would get there. I mean, if to meet when you do the math to meet the requirements for a 2-story house in this district on there, you would need 30 feet of width, and they've only got 27 with the boundary line adjustment, so it would be impossible to build on. With a 1-story house, you would have 5 feet, and we can't build a house in 5 feet of width. So they need to have the reduced setbacks in order to be able to physically fit a house on this small lot. Then we have an additional 3 or 4 requirements for parking that need to be addressed on this through variances, and that is because it's in the multifamily zone. In the multifamily zone, we don't allow parking to be in the front of buildings, which is typically where parking is for single-family homes. So we need to address that. They also the lot is too narrow to be able to fit 4 parking spaces, which is what we require. So but they can fit 3, and that's what they're proposing to do. We also require that 2 of the parking spaces be enclosed in a garage. This is barely big enough to fit a house on, let alone a 2-car garage. So all of those would require variances for all of those things in order just to be able to replace a modest-sized single-family home on the lot. And so that's what the applicant has requested. You can see, I would have the picture, you can see the house on here, in the condition that it's in now, with the burnt house, and you can see that its situation in the neighborhood, and you can see that the houses that are right next door to it, and that they're similarly situated. So the reason that both of these are coming to you tonight is because we have in Mount Vernon the consolidated permit process, which allows applicants to come in and they ask for all their permits together. And so they've come in and they've asked for their special permission permit and their variance. We combine those 2 together, and when we do that, our code says we have to go to the highest authority for whichever permit it is that will make the decision. So typically, you guys haven't seen variances for years and years and years because typically our hearing examiner makes those decisions. But when we combine the variances with the special permission, then it has to come to you for the decision because the special permission is the highest level permit. So that's why you're seeing this tonight. I thought that because you haven't seen it before, I thought you might be interested why you're seeing it, but that is the reason on that. So the recommendation tonight is it's suggested that the council follow the hearing examiner recommendation and move to adopt the accompanying resolution and approve the request to continue the non-conforming single-family use in the multifamily zone on the lot that doesn't meet the required lot size, and further that approval of the requested variances for parking and setbacks to allow the single-family home to be replaced. And with that, if you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer them for you.
Any questions from council? All right.
I can't. You got a question?
I think I read this in the material, but the neighbors have had a chance to weigh in and all of that. So I didn't see any disagreeable comments in there. in the package.
Yeah, so just like with all of our permits, it did go through the public notification process and the public comments. We received no public comments on it. We had the hearing at the hearing examiner, and there was the only people that were at the hearing was the applicant. So we had no comments from any of the neighbors on them, and they were all notified.
Yeah, I can only imagine with a half-burnt house, the neighbors are anxious to see this move forward, and the applicants are very anxious to see it move forward. And so I'm just appreciative of the staff of wrangling this complex thing. And I'm sure it didn't happen as fast as the applicants wanted, but it seems like you've got good solutions presented for us, so thank you.
All right, Councilmember Brenner?
I feel totally the same way. I think it's common sense just to move this as fast as you can, so.
All right.
I would move to approve.
Nope.
Nope.
We're gonna have a public hearing.
That's right.
Don't try to trip me
Well, I
up
really
here.
want it to go through, maybe.
All right.
All right.
So this is a closed record public hearing, which means
Yes.
only the folks that have public or have comments on record are allowed to testify. And if I understand correctly, that would be the proponents of the application. So if the proponents of the application are here and they wish to address council with regard to approval of this ordinance, I don't know, this is gonna be, this is gonna be an ordinance. Resolution? Thank you. They're welcome to step forward and do so now. Okay. Doesn't look like anybody wishes to speak, so I'm gonna close the closed public record, and I would ask what the will of the council would be. This would be Resolution 1043.
I'll move for approval of Resolution 1043.
Okay, Councilmember Hutchins has moved the adoption of Resolution 1043. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Carreras. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting Resolution 1043 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the sign of nay. Ayes have it, and the resolution is adopted. All right. And I see we have some happy folks out in the audience too. So.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right, our next order of business is a public hearing in regards to amendments to Mount Vernon Municipal Code 17.102.
So this is now that we've done the last one of the special permission hearings, we can now look at at amending the ordinance to create the administrative process that we've been talking about throughout the course of the year. And earlier tonight, Stacy gave you you remember the exhibit with the pyramid on it, and we're back down now into the legislative, and so we're not gonna, since she did a great job of presenting all of that information, I won't bore you guys with that again. So we'll just jump right into the specifics of this particular legislation. So as you're aware, in April of this year, you adopted the Resolution 1031, which was the docket for the work program for the year, and then we started talking about this particular piece of legislation because you were seeing a lot of those types of the really simple decks and eaves and that kind of stuff coming in front of, and we all had talked about the fact that we wanted to see a simpler process. So in June, we met with the Planning Commission in a discussion session, and during that discussion session, we asked them about how they wanted the notification to happen and for these administrative processes, whether there should be no notification, or whether the notifications go normally to the 300 feet, or if it should be some kind of a hybrid, which we have in the code that was just for adjacent properties. And the Planning Commission decided that they would like to see the notification of just the adjacent properties for this, and that is what was reflected in the ordinance that is in front of you tonight. And I know we've talked about that a little bit at the council committee meetings too. So then in July, you updated the docket so that to include this and a number of other things, including the chickens. And then through July, we went through the procedural, legal, and compliance parts of it. We went through the SEPA process. We sent it out to the Department of Commerce and sent out all of our public notification on it. And in August, we had the Planning Commission public hearing to consider these changes, and the Planning Commission did unanimously agree to move the suggestions forward to you, that isn't reflected in the draft ordinance that you have in front of you tonight. And so then tonight we need to have the city council's public hearing on this, and then you guys will decide how you want to move forward with that. So just a quick summary of the code amendments. They include changing revising 17102, which is our nonconforming structures and uses, to include an administrative type 2 process for the most common types of projects: the decks, the eaves, the things, the porches, the ones that we were coming through. And I'll remind you that for those, the new improvements need to meet the requirements of the code. They will meet the setbacks, and it's just that there's something else on the building that doesn't meet it already. Or in this case, as tonight, it's a single family in a multifamily zone, something like that. So then we would also revise the 17102 for the more complex processes, or for the, things like if you're going to add on a room or something, those would be a type 3 process. It would go to the hearing examiner and have the hearing examiner be the approval authority on it. And then we needed to update 1405, which is our procedures to implement the code changes. That's so that we would get the new type of permit into the table. It has all of our different types of permits. We would get the type 2 permit into the noticing, so that they would get the right kind of noticing, just those procedural kinds of things. And then finally, we had to update 1415, the table in that, to include fees because we have new permits. We've had to put those in and get the fees for those. So those are the changes that we are proposing tonight. And so our recommendation pursuant to the municipal code, that you hold the open record public hearing, accept testimony, and then deliberate on the recommendation from the Planning Commission concerning the amendments to the nonconforming structures and uses. And then at your pleasure would consider approving, denying, or modifying or referring back to the Planning Commission the proposed amendments to chapters 17102, 1405, and 1415. And we did include a draft ordinance in your materials, should you choose to approve the proposed amendments.
All right. Any questions? All right. So this is an open public record hearing. That means anyone in the audience is allowed to speak, unlike the last one. So I'm going to go ahead and open the open public record hearing. Is there anyone wishing to speak in regards to this ordinance? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. This would be, we did not adopt the last ordinance, so this would be ordinance 3873. I think your notes show it as being 3874, but the last ordinance was not adopted or acted on, so this will be actually ordinance 3873. And what is the will of the council?
I'll move to approve ordinance 3873. We've talked about this for quite a long time, so this is all information that we've been given over the past several months. So this isn't a new or surprising ordinance for us. So.
All right, Councilmember Hudson has moved to approve ordinance 3873. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Morales. Any further discussion?
I'll just note, thank you to staff for bringing this forward. We've explored how we can make these non-conforming permits just quicker and easier. There's a lot of small properties in the city, so there's a lot of our old town that's non-conforming, and it's super frustrating for landowners when they just want to do something very simple and they're told they have to go through this big process and hearing examiner and plats and surveys. So thank you, staff, on behalf of all those people that are gonna find this much easier to go through, and it's just one more step where we're trying to, continue to streamline and improve, our permitting processes to benefit the city.
All right, any other comments? All right, all those in favor of adopting ordinance 3873 as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the sign of nay. Ayes have it, ordinance 3873 is adopted. All right. Parks Director, Jennifer Bruner. She has a street closure for us. We get to move on to the fun stuff now.
Glad you think so.
It's all fun, right? It just depends on how you look at it. Good evening, council. I am here to talk to you about a street closure, 2 street closure requests. One is for, they're both for the Downtown Association. One is for the trick-or-treating event. And this event is asking to close on October 31st along South First Street, starting at West Kincaid Street and ending at West Division. And then for the holiday parade, this street closure again is looking to close December 3rd along Cleveland Avenue and South First Street, starting at Broadway and ending at Montgomery. For the safety of the events, the Downtown Association is asking for the streets to be closed for the trick-or-treating event beginning on Tuesday, October 31st at 3 p.m. and reopening them around 6:30 p.m. And on Sunday, December 3rd at 3:30 p.m. with parking closed at 1:30 p.m. and reopening at the conclusion of the parade around 6:30 p.m. So these are completely similar to what has happened in the past. And so we're just looking to provide those 2 activities to the public again in our downtown corridor. So staff is recommending the approval of the street closures for the 2023 Mount Vernon Downtown Association Trick-or-Treat event and our holiday parade.
Any questions for Director Bruner?
These are 2 of my favorites, so I would move to approve street closure.
Motion is made by Councilmember Molinar. Is there a second?
I'll second. It's candy and Christmas, and
Seconded
go to
by
Gary's
Councilmember
shop for
Hudson.
the best candy. So make sure you check out Gary's shop, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm in 2nd Street, so.
All right, all those in favor of the street closures signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the sign of nay. Looks like kids get to trick or treat this year, so. Item E, we are gonna remove from the agenda. That was an agreement with the Silver Air Bowman Club. There's one document that's missing, for finalization on that. They should have that submitted by the next council meeting, and then we can take action on it at that time. And now we're gonna talk about grant money.
As I mentioned to you earlier in the committee report, the Parks and Richmond Services Department applied for a deferred maintenance grant with RCO, which is the Recreation Conservation Office at the state. With this, they are requiring that we have a resolution that basically says we are going to follow all of the state regulations regarding this grant if we were to get the grant, and that you guys are aware that we have applied for the grant. So staff is requesting council to approve the Recreation Conservation Office Deferred Maintenance Grant Resolution and authorize the listed individuals to pursue the RCO grant identified. And so those individuals would be myself and the mayor.
All right, this was an item we discussed during committee. Any other additional questions for Director Bruner? Not, we'll entertain a motion to adopt it.
Looks like many of us need coffee, so. Come on. I'll motion for the approval for the adoption of the RCO Deferred Maintenance Grant Resolution and authorize the listed individuals to pursue the RCO grant identified.
And that would be resolution number 1044, I believe.
Is it a resolution? Okay.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Councilmember Chris. All those in favor of adopting resolution 1044, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the sign of nays. That resolution is adopted.
Thank you.
The final order of business is an agreement with King Technologies, and looks like Director Phillips is here to present that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So staff is requesting approval of a professional services agreement with King Technologies to finalize the development of the Mount Vernon ADA transition plan. The city is required to adopt an ADA transition plan as part of meeting federally mandated ADA requirements. This plan inventories and evaluates the condition of the ADA facilities associated with our transportation network and prioritizes corrective actions where deficiencies may exist. The city currently follows the federal ADA requirements as part of a standard practice in maintenance and transportation project development, transportation planning, development review, and other related activities. An adopted ADA transition plan codifies the city's current and future practices in planning, maintenance, project construction, and corrective action and response. Al King is the principal of King Technologies. His firm is highly experienced in developing ADA transition plans for small and medium-sized jurisdictions throughout Washington. Al has developed his understanding and expertise through a 30-year career working at WSDOT and the County Road Administration Board, as well as other local agencies. The scope of work for finalizing our plan is not to exceed $47,000. Staff is requesting a motion to approve authorization for the mayor to execute a contract with King Technologies, PLCC, to finalize the development of the Mount Vernon ADA transition plan in the amount not to exceed $47,000. Any of your questions?
Is there any questions for Director Phillips? If not, we would entertain a motion to adopt the agreement.
I'll move to approve the professional services agreement with King Technologies for the development of the Mount Vernon ADA transition plan.
Second.
Motion has been made by Councilmember Hudson, seconded by Councilmember Molinar. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by the sign of nay. Ayes have it, that motion is adopted. I want to take just a moment. I know there's a gentleman in the back of the room. I think that he was here maybe for some public comment and had missed that opportunity. And I would like to invite him, if he'd like to address council, I'd like to invite him forward at this time to address council.
First, let me thank you for giving me this opportunity to address you. My name is Joseph Coomer. I live in Oak Harbor, Washington. I'm a retired aircraft engineer, and I have invented solutions to earthquakes, forest fires, and floods. The problem I have is nobody will believe me. I submit my work to FEMA, there is no response. And let me go through, let's look at the earthquake situation. I'm proposing a total new concept to design structures to be earthquake-proof. And that is using suspension. When you suspend a structure, it is no longer connected to the earth. In an earthquake, it does not move. With no movement, there are no dynamic loads. And no dynamic load to absorb, the suspended structure is earthquake-proof. Okay? It's pretty simple to do. There are 2 or 3 concepts I've designed. Basically, it's on the support. You can have like a fitting on top of it. On that fitting is that's ball bearings. And then there's a coil spring, a plate and a coil spring, and a plate, and then the structure above that. In an earthquake, the ball bearings will move with the earthquake. The support will move with the earthquake. The ball bearings will absorb the lateral and the spring will absorb the vertical. The structure does not move. This also means that you can design a structure. In fact, there is no foundation required. If there's a foundation, it has to be cut loose, because you're gonna have, the structure does not move and the earth moves. So you can't have that structure. The problem is, I'd like to see this body, for instance, pass a resolution supporting my work. Because I project that in the next 10 years, there'll be 100,000 people die of earthquakes. This is huge. In the Turkey one, there was over 50,000 that died, all right? And my solution would cut that drastically, probably down to almost zero. Because when you suspend a structure, it's earthquake proof, and it doesn't move, okay? So I got some handouts here on that, and now the next item I want to talk about.
Just so you know, you sent a letter to council. We received your letter to council, and that was read into the record earlier this evening, maybe before you got here. Our clerk read the email that you'd sent to council into the record.
I don't understand, man, sir.
So you.
Can I continue on, can I go on to my next subject?
You're allowed, we usually limit public comment
Well,
to
the
3
thing is,
minutes.
Here's my problem, okay?
So I can give you 2 more minutes.
Okay. The Forest Service is corrupt and incompetent, especially California. For instance, I have evidence that they changed a bill for an aircraft contractor from $801,000 to $7,801,000. I would like to see this body, director, their attorney, to write a request to CalPAR for copy of all payments made to contractors. The thing with what you can't realize is they're robbing the taxpayer vastly. You know, I think my constituent, they're stealing about $50 million a season. This is enormous. Let me give you another example where they contracted in 2020 for a tiny 2-place helicopter, all right? And they flew for 40 hours in the 9-day season, all right? And they paid that man over $900,000. And for the 40 hours, that's over $22,000 an hour. This is corruption, people. You know.
Right.
I'd like to touch one more topic.
I actually have to cut cut the time.
I'd like to touch on flood control.
We've read your report into our public record. We've given you an opportunity to speak. We limit our time to 3 minutes, and I actually gave you an additional couple of minutes. We thank you for coming. We thank you for your comments. If you have anything additional that you'd like to add, please send that to the council.
Like I say, I'm desperate trying to get. See, I've spent over $20,000 trying to sell my forest fire stuff. If we change to big aircraft on forest fires and let the Air Force do it, you can put out all forest fires in one pass with big aircraft. Let me give you some numbers.
We've read the information.
Let me give you some numbers, all right?
Sir.
All right. On a 10-acre fire.
Sir, we have read your information into our public record. If you have any additional comments you would like to make to council, you can send those via email. But it's only fair to the rest of the public that has public comment time that we limit our time to within what the rules are for the engagement, and we've exceeded those times. So I'm going to have to ask you to sit down.
Well, let me give you my literature, please.
You can if you hand the literature to the clerk, she'll make sure that the council receives that. All right.
Let me give you my literature, anyhow.
Mr. City Council, or Mr. City Council, Mr. City Attorney, is there any reason?
Yeah, like I say.
Is there any any need for a executive session this evening?
There is no need. This council meeting is adjourned.
Okay. Meeting is adjourned at 8:43.